Hi everyone, this is Chris Rainey. Welcome to episode 3 of HRD Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners. Today we're lucky enough to be joined by Savio DSouza. Savio is the Talent and Development Director for Europe, Eurasia, Middle East and Africa at Coca-Cola. Savio, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. How are you today?
It's good to have you on board. Thank you very much. Savio, fill in the gaps. Tell our members a little bit more about yourself and your journey to becoming the Talent and Development Director at Coca-Cola.
All right, sure. So I've been with Coca-Cola for almost 15 years now. And I joined the Coca-Cola system way back in a bottling plant in India. And that's where my journey began. I spent the first few years rotating through different functions within the Coca-Cola company, and finally agreed to take on a role as the HR manager for one of our bottling plants. I spent about 5 years working with the bottling company before moving out of India and taking on a role in Istanbul, Turkey, which was to manage talent and development for the Eurasia and Africa group. And that included a whole wide variety of countries and a wide variety of experiences, things that I'd never experienced before while I was tucked away in India. And from there, I had an opportunity to go back to India, bring some of the learning that I had from that varied experience, and then move from there over to Europe about 5 years ago. And yeah, collecting experiences along the way. That's what the journey's been like.
Fantastic. And what led you down the talent and development route?
Yeah, that was pretty easy. So there's a variety of things that I began doing while I was in the generalist role, and the one that really had the most impact and the one that I could clearly see that I could really influence the way that our business was being able to deliver was in the talent space. So it was a process of elimination just to see what really attracted me and what I believed could have the greatest impact on our business. And that's a place that I began investigating, learning more about, trying my hand at it. And, well, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, it was something I was good at. So I tried more things and got more experiences, and that's how I built it.
Fantastic. And how quickly did your role expand to the level that you have now?
Okay. So, over the past 15 years, there's been a constant change of pace. Our company has gone through several rounds of evolution, and there's equal degrees of readiness and equal amounts of the company betting on me even before I was ready to do a role, and just investing in me and trusting my capabilities. And that's what really helped. So if you think about how that pace of change has been, while I was much younger and in a bottling plant, I think that was a very different kind of a learning experience, which is more about learning our business, learning the levers that really made it successful as a business, and really developing a financial and commercial acumen that is required in the roles that we do. And since then, it's been experiences that are more deep in terms of human resources, understanding what that intangible lever looks like when you're trying to be able to differentiate performance, when you're trying to really go beyond what is set and what's a level playing field amongst competition. And so those different experiences have actually been slower to come by, but richer in just what they have taught me.
Perfect. Just to give me some insight, what does a typical day look like for Savio? What is your morning ritual? How do you spend the first few hours of your working day?
Right, so the first few hours of my working day are basically to check on where my team is at. I've got a team that's spread across our geography, and I do a check-in just to see if there's any email from any one of them or any text or anything of the sort, just to see where they're at. We're not a massive organization, and so it's possible for us to stay in touch quite frequently. So that's how I begin pretty much every single day, just checking where the team is at and if there's anything that they need. Second in line is basically what's urgent, what's critical. That's probably burning a hole in my mailbox, that's where I'd go. I think it's also fair to say that there is no typical day. That's the first couple of things that I do in a day, but there's no 2 days that are the
Sure,
same.
sure. Well, outside the team and the mailbox, what occupies your mind on a daily basis?
My children do.
Of
I'm
course.
guessing that's not what you're looking for, but quite honestly,
No, of course. No, it's a great answer.
that's my pride and joy. That's what takes up a lot of my life. And if you really think about why I do what I do, that's primarily it. So, yeah, they occupy a fair bit of my mind space.
Hmm. I think to be successful in anything in life, you have to have a very powerful why, and I think your family is more than enough powerful
Absolutely.
why. So
Absolutely.
that's a great answer. So what are some of the major successes that you've achieved in your career over the last 15 years?
Major successes over the last 15 years.
It's a big question.
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. I don't actually measure success, and this varies per person, I guess. But the way that I actually measure success is in our business actually being successful and being able to really deliver against whatever it is aimed at delivering. Short of that, just my perception of how things are over here. If you're doing something that only satisfies something that is within a function or within a departmental goal, yeah, there's plenty of those, but really they don't count too much in our terms. If it hasn't helped sell a case or helped somebody sell a case, yeah, it's not really great work. Yeah. So if I think
No, of course.
if I think about what I'd count as one of the biggest achievements that I've got, not that we're talking about it, working with our bottling partners in a couple of roles ago, working with our bottling partners while I was in Eurasia and Africa, in really building capability among our sales force back in Central Africa, around one of the systems that was so we had a lift and shift of a greater sales capability infusion that we picked up from a different part of the world and tried to bring that into Central Africa. And I think just the kind of impact that we had over there, I would say that's about today something I'm very, very proud of, because that's a big push in just how we were able to move forward within that market. That's yeah, that'd be.
And what effect did that have on the business?
Significant, not immediate. And yes, there were immediate results as well. But I think what's significant is in a market that's emerging, that's still going through the throes of understanding what kind of growth they can achieve. They don't know yet what the higher number looks like. Equipping them to really be able to chase that, be confident in themselves, and really help them learn from what they're doing so that forms a continuous loop. That goes a long way. And in my mind, that's something that we did there at the right time when that market was in that stage of evolution. And it was a combination of us bringing resources, time, effort, energy, but also the timing of where that market was in terms of evolution. Just that combination of factors really made it successful.
Perfect. So where is most of your time focus? What are you focused on predominantly now within the business?
Within our business, right. So what we're doing within our business currently is we have made a move from a traditional method of managing performance to one that is based on more frequent, future-focused conversations, informal conversations, and it's called performance enablement. And our focus has shifted from really managing and documenting performance objectives, cascades, and tracking performance to a more regular interaction between manager and associate, a high focus on the dialogue that takes place between managers and associates, ensuring that that's an ongoing dialogue that enables performance and enables people to grow as a result of the experiences and of the time and effort that they put in at work, and it doesn't stay to be a process. So it's a mental shift. It's a model that draws on it being more a practice, something that you get better at the more that you do, and from being a process which was embedded more in rules, boundaries, and things that held you back, a lot of constraints. That's where most of my time goes now, because like any good change, it requires a lot of stakeholdering and a lot
Sure.
of managing expectations, making sure we're making progress, celebrating the small wins, really communicating around the big wins, and making sure we're on track. That's a full-time job, yeah.
No, I can imagine. What are the challenges that you faced putting that in place?
Our how okay, like most change, I think your biggest challenge is you want to hold on to whatever you have, even though
Sure.
you can see why you might want to change. And I think the biggest challenge is in terms of getting role models who demonstrate that for you. It is people manager acceptance. It is really helping people learn new behaviors. And what people lack, well, the way I look at things, if you have strong enough role models, people who can demonstrate what that looks like, people then begin to use that and emulate that. So having that clarity, getting the right role models, communicating just how well they have done that, actually making sure that those would-be role models do walk the talk themselves is also part of the challenge. So I think that's the biggest. Otherwise, if you think about how that really works, it's a multi-faceted machine. So there's not one thing that is a challenge. I think it's a combination of things that need to work in unison for it to really work smooth, beautifully. Yeah.
And what are the benefits that you've seen from this already? Have you seen any benefits from it, and how do they look?
Yeah. So we're 2 months in, and yep. And here's the
Okay.
immediate benefit, because this is a conversation we're having today. I've got a 12% uptake for month on month, higher than the previous month, of usage by managers. And why do I say that's a good result? Because month one, when you launch and you do a lot of fanfare, you do a lot of communication that goes along with it, you expect, like any good campaign, to have the kind of payoff that you're looking for.
The initial adoption.
Exactly. Basically. Yeah. There's some initial adoption. There's usually some people who are curious. There's another who are going to comply. You've got the whole range of experiences that people are going to have from the first one.
Yeah.
In my experience, if they see value in it, they're going to come back, right? That's what repeat purchases are about. So to get a 12% swing up the second month on, in that we'd have to probably have done a fair degree of communication again to make sure that people track it and manage it. And then I'm saying that we would have to have done that based on how we used to do performance management earlier. Follow up with people all the time to make sure that they actually are doing what they're expected to do. We didn't have a chance to do any of that. We barely got out one reminder to say, guys, guess this is what we're trying to do. This is when we're going to do it. So to me, that's a great confirmation of the fact that, heck, these guys found some value in it. That's the reason why they're coming back. The other bit so other than the informal, frequent conversations between manager and associate, it's also balanced out with a conversation between upward feedback to managers. So clearly, managers are also getting an input into how they're leading their teams, and therefore they are seeing the value in it because that loop gets closed. So as far as I'm reading the results 2 months in, that seems like a great move forward, because I can see people now owning this more and earlier than what I thought it was going to take. I think it's still a long way from saying, okay, we made a change or we've completed the transition. I don't think so. But I think we're headed in the right direction.
No, definitely. It's funny you mentioned that, because today at one of the meetings, that was something that the members were talking about, is that you normally get that initial adoption straight away, like you said, which you expect, because it's something that you've been, but it's so hard to make it consistent, and to become as part of their day-to-day process. So what did you think? What did you do in advance? Do you feel that led to that engagement, which is pretty high from my experience for the second month in to see an increase? What work did you do before that you think's led to that?
There's no single silver bullet. I think there was a great deal of what's the right word? Decentralization, local adoption. So this wasn't something that was driven down, but more invited people who were interested to come and learn how we're going to do this, who then turned into advocates and change agents.
Great. Okay, perfect. That explains it then.
That's what primarily worked. And once again, this is not human resources led. Yeah, this is business performance. Managing performance has nothing to do with human resources, other than the fact that you draw on subject matter expertise around managing performance from that function. This is business performance and links basically to what your business plans are for the year. So the people we're talking about are not human resources people, but they're business people who are role modeling it locally and championing it and educating people about it and advocating it. That goes a long way, because
so they have an invested interest.
They are vested in the success of the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, well that makes perfect sense. And so what effect, just out of interest, in your area, what effect has technology had over the last few years, and how are you currently leveraging technology in Coca-Cola to your advantage?
Over the last 3 years, let me actually put it differently, which is we're on the cusp of embracing new technology. So we've been working through technology that hasn't been great over the last few years, and we're about to adopt Workday, and that's around here. So we're looking at us walking down a path where we spend less time collating information to really analyzing that and make decisions based on that. I think that's been not so great journey for us in terms of where we have been technology investment wise, and where we are going forward allows us to actually have the data at our fingertips, which will help us make more predictive decisions, more analytical decisions that we aren't being able to do today. Quite often right now, just so much time is invested in gathering the data that you feel like you need to congratulate yourself once you get the data. I'm not just talking.
I've heard that. Yeah. Today, Workday came up on it a few times, and one of the companies, which really shocked me, said in the past it took them up to 2 weeks to actually give their board an actual head count, which I was pretty shocked at. And I think having Workday and being able to use that data to make strategic decisions and to communicate with the business is really changed the entire way some of the members that I work with, the way they operate. Yeah. So that must be something quite exciting for you. I'm sure it's going to be obviously a lot of work to put it in place, but it's also going to take away a lot of that manual work, which you can put that energy to better use, focusing more of the strategic side than the manual.
I'll put it this way, Chris. It's like getting a new hob in the kitchen, right? You still got to have your mix of ingredients to be able to make the kind of cake you want to, or whatever else you're cooking, right? But the fact that you've got a new hub means that you probably are going to get a little more careful about how you measure things and put them together. That's the hope. The technology itself is not going to solve it. It is about exactly what we're going to do with it. That's really the advantage. Yes, it's got a whole lot of shiny new buttons that we can press and expect it to do things to the food that we are making. So that's the expectation.
Definitely, because if you're not inputting the right data, then it becomes pretty irrelevant. It's great when you have all of the business inputting the right data into it. Then what you get out of it's great, but it's definitely not going to be. It's not definitely not going to solve something overnight for the business, which I can completely understand. Yes. So on that point of because whenever these changes take place, you mentioned earlier about the engagement piece with and you are very engaged with the business. What in your career, what have you found to be the most effective way to engage and communicate with your senior leadership team?
Um, well, part of the contracting is actually building your own credibility, and I think that goes a long way. Um,
Yeah.
in doing that, for people, I'm just talking about myself now, not the company.
No, of
What's
course.
important is if I am to pitch something or to sell something, I need to be able to anticipate or question it, just like it was my own money that is going to go behind that investment.
Wow, that's a great way of looking at it.
If I'm not convinced, I don't have a hope in hell trying to sell it to anybody else. If
Yeah.
I haven't done that kind of due diligence, I wouldn't expect anybody to put money on the table behind anything I have to put forward to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, primary. Secondary, I think, is just what is a variety of solutions, what's your due diligence that you bring to the table with all of those things, and what's the data that supports why such a decision might be a good decision. So I think it's the credibility, but it's also then the quality of what you're bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Because even now, I started doing putting together some of these projects at the age of 17 years old.
Wow.
And even I know, I left school and started working at the HR Directors Business Summit, which you may know, the one in Birmingham. So immediately, my first job was bringing together 800 HR directors every year. The only reason I mention that is from there to 10 years later to where I am now, the number one challenge still, for some reason, 10 years later, still seems to be a lot around the engagement and communication with the senior leadership team. It seems to be a topic which is repeated over and over and over again. And no matter what project we put together, it's something that comes up. And a lot of the members really struggle in even some very mature businesses to communicate with the board effectively.
Yep.
And I think what you just said is great. One, having the confidence in what you're saying, you need to really believe in it.
Yep.
And two, making sure that you have the data to back it up as well. And I think normally they miss one or the other.
Let me qualify the confidence bit as well. I do think that knowing the levers of your business, and I mean not business, but your business, is critical to really getting that credibility. And that helps immensely, because if people then understand that, people being senior leadership understands that you do understand what their constraints and what their levers are, then they're likely more attuned to your due diligence. That's what I've experienced.
On the point of skills,
Yes.
what HR skills do you feel will be important in the future, or more important in the future?
I think the shift from that's not fair. Let me actually talk about it in terms of being predictive and using data to be predictive, and actually going ahead to say where exactly are we going based on what data we have, and not just internal data, but having good, strong external benchmarks, making sure that you're abreast of market intelligence from a business point of view, and therefore from a talent point of view. I think that's going to be critical.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an area definitely that a lot of the members struggle with. Yesterday, I was actually speaking with Mia Van Stralen, who's the HR director for IBM, and she actually comes from a very technical IT background. She actually used to be a developer, and based on her experience on analytics, IBM actually sort of plucked her from a different segment of the business and pulled her into HR, as she says. Because of that skill set, they realized that really was the future, and technology is going to play such a huge part. And I was speaking to her yesterday, and she seems to be sort of ahead of the game, let's say. And even from our perspective as a business to put together events for HR leaders, when we actually reach out, myself and Will, to look for HR leaders to speak on the subject of HR technology analytics, it's very difficult to find someone to step up, because it's such a new area. And I think we're only at the beginning, really. I can definitely see how that's going to play in part. How do you keep yourself up to date with sort of these changes in technology? How do you stay abreast of what's out there and how it could affect you?
Through my news feed, quite honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And well, I'm interested in technology. I'm interested in business and in world politics. Having 123 countries right now, I think it just is important to know what's happening in at least the big ones in current geography. And having grown up and worked in Asia, that's an area that's always close to me. So yeah, it's I seem to have a wide varied set of interests, but I think the flip side of that is I'm never consistent. So
do you think the HR has enough support and training in this area?
Oh, I think that's actually personality based on the individual, not HR. No.
That's true.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, look, what I'd like to do, this leads us on nicely to sort of a quick fire round. So where I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no more than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Amazing answers. All right.
No pressure.
All right. Let's go for it.
Great. So what was the number one thing that was holding you back from sort of becoming the role or the HR or the director of talent and development? What was the number one thing that was holding you back?
Allowing myself to admit to myself that I don't know everything about everything. I think that was the number one thing.
Perfect. What's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
Of business advice? Yeah, it is business advice. From my father-in-law. You got to do what you got to do to be able to do what you want to do. So that's the best business advice I've ever received.
And how have you put that into practice?
If you're as straight speaking as that to people who are around you, and really don't focus on the fact that work is work and work is the only thing that you're existing for, but recognize people as human beings and the fact that they have balance in their lives and they bring their whole self to work and that they contribute in some way to a bigger whole. Just telling that story out makes a lot of people believe what you have to say a lot more. That's been my experience.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. So what is one book that you would recommend to our audience and why? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think that's a book that anybody and everybody should read because a whole lot of people spend a lot of time working to earn, and once earned, don't spend enough time managing that well enough. So that's why. Definitely. It's actually the first book that was ever given to me.
Wow. There you go.
From a friend of mine, who's his dad's one of the sort of richest men in Malaysia.
Oh, right then.
and he was studying in London, and when he came to visit, he gave me that book when I first started in this industry actually. So that was actually the first ever book that I got around business. So that's such a bit of a coincidence. It's actually on my shelf in my room right now.
Wonderful coincidence.
And I've given that book, and I think that I've bought that book for nearly all of my members of my team.
All right.
Have read that book. So a bit of a coincidence there. What's one internet resource that you use to increase productivity? For example, Evernote or LinkedIn, as an example.
Productivity.
What's one internet resource that you use?
Well, I use LinkedIn quite a bit to be able to keep myself abreast of what's going on. That's part of my newsfeed. So I'd say LinkedIn. But it's not productivity. It's more growing my perspective on things.
Definitely. Yeah. It's definitely my number one.
Yeah.
And what's one thing about your business that you're most excited about today?
It still feels like a 3-year-old company instead of 130-year-old company. It's just still that same energy. It's still that same zeal. Everybody actually shows up with that much zest. That's what is most exciting. It's all
That's absolutely
new day.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's such an, it must, you know, it must be because you've been there 15 years.
I've been there 15
So
years.
and it feels like a few years from the sounds of it, which is great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, look, Savio, you've given us some great actionable advice, and I know that our listeners will be better for it. So I thank you for that. Give our listeners one parting piece of guidance, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. Parting piece of guidance. Well, if my guidance is of any use, I just.
I'm sure it will be.
My father-in-law said it is. You got to do what you got to do to be able to do what you want to do. So that's it. Just keep that focus, keep that balance, and I think we all survive for the pursuit of happiness. So that's the ultimate goal.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, look, thanks again. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Guys, head over to hrdleaders.com and there you'll be able to find all of the show notes from the episode, everything that we've been talking about, timestamps, and link to all of the resources. Savio, thanks again for sharing your journey with our listeners today, and I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, perfect.
Take care.
Great.